Marketer of the Day, Episode 628, Marketer of the Day Book Case Study, How I Monetized My Podcast and Earned $4,000 Assembling a Compilation Book I Didn't Even Write.
Hey, and welcome back to the show. This is Mr. Robert Plank, and I want to tell you about the book that I recently published that you can check out at marketerofthedaybook.com that I was paid $4,000 to assemble, and I didn't even write it. It's called a compilation book, and you should be creating this as well. And you can charge whatever you want. I mean, ideally, you'd charge more than I charge, but I mean, you can charge peanuts, you can charge dirt cheap, break even, your own cost. You can do it for free. But I want to tell you about this concept called a compilation book. And I love this idea because it's a way to network. It's a way to get some really deep connections. It's a way to be associated with the winners, with the players in your field without a lot of effort. And it works even better if you're shy. So let me explain. You should have a book where you are a co-author with other influencers in your field. And so this idea is called a compilation book, and you might have seen these out there, but if not, look into it. Make this one of your lists because you can buy your way into the club. There are events you can go to. There are speakers out there where like a Michael Gerber type or a Mark Victor Hansen type or a Robert Allen type, these sorts of huge celebrity names, or maybe a celebrity in a specific niche, where these celebrities will say, I'll create a book and I'll write the first chapter, but then you, Robert Plank, you can write chapter 7, and you write these 5 pages, you send me in your chapter, and then you'll be chapter 7 in this book, and now you'll be associated in this book with me. And so a lot of these big name speakers, they might charge you $1,000, they might charge you $1,500 for you to be in their book. And so you write your own chapter, you send it in, and then they will take care of printing and having all the copies and the marketing, and you do some of the marketing as well. But imagine if you wanted to be in 10 different books with 20 different authors each. And now you're not only associated with these authors, but now you have easy joint venture connections with them, right? Because if I wrote chapter 7 and you wrote chapter 3, now I'm in the door, right? Now I can interview you. Now I can promote you. Now you can promote me. Now we're instant friends. And so this is a really interesting idea that you're going to see more and more of, this whole thing of a compilation book. And I have to admit that I didn't see this very often until I started looking into more of this speaking stuff, going into more of these speaker events. And it turns out it's all over the place. So here's how you can do this. Is option number 1 for you is that you should look into buying yourself a chapter in a compilation book, especially if it's with a big name, because that's quick credibility for you. But what you can also do is create your own compilation book. And so I highly, highly recommend that in whatever field you're in, whatever niche, you create a podcast. But you make that podcast as wide a net as possible. So let's say that you're a WordPress expert. Well, a common mistake someone might make is they say, I'm good at setting up WordPress websites. I'm going to make a podcast about WordPress, and I'm only going to interview other WordPress programmers. Well, that's a mistake because now you're limiting yourself to basically interviewing your competitors. But if you made a website setup podcast, or a podcast for programmers, or a podcast for online business owners, then you can interview a wide variety of people, and you can interview people who are happy to be on your show because they are getting the attention of your audience, and it's a whole untapped audience they wouldn't have access to. And you can feel good about sending your audience off to other people that are not going to take business away from you. So I interviewed someone named Mike Vini, who helps people with depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, troubled teens to relieve stress through drum circles. I interviewed Alicia Patterson, who puts on children's plays and teaches science and teaches important things that kids need to learn, but in a fun way. So I've interviewed someone who's good at keeping your office clean. I've interviewed someone who's good at self-confidence. So if I limited myself to just internet marketing or just business owners, I really would have been holding myself back. And you shouldn't hold yourself back either. You should go to podcastcrusher.com and set up your very own podcast. That way you can send out these requests and interview people who are looking for a mutually beneficial exchange, right? There are people who do nothing but show up on podcasts all day, and they have life figured out, because what do? Well, let's say that you have someone who is who's really good at creating USB hubs. So I have a person in my Marketer of the Day book named Bernie Thompson, and there's a device that I just pulled out of my desk drawer called a pluggable USB 2.0 display adapter. And this is a tiny little box about the size of a pack of gum. And on one end, you plug in a USB cable, and on the other end is a plug for your monitor called a DVI port. So a plug for your screen. And for my computers, I like to use these things called all-in-one PCs, where there might not be a special plug for a second monitor. And my old computer only had the one plug. So I bought this little device. I think it was maybe like $50, $100. And in one end I plug in USB, other end I plug in a monitor, and boom, instantly I had a second monitor. So this guy, Bernie Thompson, and I didn't even realize it was made by him until years later, but he creates these sorts of products. And so let's say Bernie Thompson wants to market his USB display adapter. Well, then he'll just spend all day long hopping on this show, talking about the problem, talking about how he solved it, and then boom, he's done. Another really fantastic guest who is not in the book, but is a friend who I've met in person, had lunch with. His name is Chris Mile. I think he's been on my show 3 times, and he's the money guy. He talks about ways to build income, ways to save on taxes, ways to plan for retirement, and he just spends all day long hopping on other people's shows. A few months ago, I interviewed a guy named John Lee Dumas from EO Fire, Entrepreneurs on Fire, and I asked him, how many shows are you appearing on today? And he said 22 shows. So he appears on 22 shows for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the most, and by the time you're done, he just hangs up on you. I guarantee it. But he only does that once a month. So one day every month, he spends probably 10, 12 hours that day hitting 22 shows. And that's the bulk of what he does. And there's a guy named Paul Potratz who, same deal. He wears these fun 3-piece suits and goofy ties and ascots, if you know what those are. And he just hops on different shows talking about what he's passionate about, talks about online business. And he has a whole team that deals with creating the products, dealing with the customer support, dealing with the other marketing aspects, but he is the figurehead. And some of these people, their only self-appointed job in their own business is to hop on other people's podcasts, OPP. Because let's say you hop on a podcast and you only get 100 clicks from it, and you only get, say, 10 opt-ins from it, or you only get a $100 sale from that, if you hopped on 5 podcasts a day, then now you could snowball into all these different sources of traffic, and some podcasts will pay out better than others. So this whole networking game with podcasting, it's huge, and you could literally spend all day every day just hopping on different shows, sharing what it is that you know, and that's it. If you're a talker, if you are a social person, you could just spend all day building traffic in that way. And you can do it from the other side of things as well. So this podcast, The Marketer of the Day, we have 600 plus episodes, and there's no way I could have cranked out that much content where it was just me. So I brought on other guests, and I found people who had a message, had a website, had an app, had a product, and wanted to talk about that. So I just asked different questions and had them do the work for me. And that's mutually beneficial, right? Because they created the content for me, and then they got the traffic from my show, from my listeners. They got the credibility, etc. So I've interviewed 600 plus people, and I kept it all organized in this spreadsheet. That way I knew how to number the episodes, what the episodes were titled, how to contact the person and tell them it was live, ask them to promote our show together, all that good stuff. But then I wanted more, because we're always looking for ways to make money, aren't we? Both you and me. And I was looking for ways to make money from my podcast. And here's the thing about making money with your podcast, is that everyone's dream is to make a podcast and just get so many thousands and millions of listeners that you could charge $10,000 per episode for some sponsorship and say, hey, today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Audible, and go claim your Audible trial, or go to Squarespace, or go to FreshBooks, right? You always hear about that one. So, or Blue Apron, right? When you hear about the big time podcasts like your Serial, your Dirty John, they say, well, we're sponsored by FreshBooks, so go check them out right now. Or we're sponsored by Blue Apron, go get your meals sent to you. So that's the dream. But let's be realistic. You're not going to have the amount of traffic that you want for your podcast, at least at first. So you check out your podcast, and for every 1,000 downloads an episode has, you can charge about $50. And so that might mean at first that you charge $20, $50 for a sponsorship. But it might be tough to get someone who's willing to pay you money if you don't have just gobs and gobs of traffic. So your alternatives are to promote affiliate links, because those are going to be around forever. Promote your own products, because you're allowed to do that. But then another source of income from your podcast could be a compilation book. And what I did was I've already been published. I think I have 12 books out. So I self-published a few books over the years, and you can check out how to do that at makeaproduct.com. So I show, and one of those was already an interview book, which I put out just for free. But strangely enough, that's one of my best sellers. And when I ask people out of all my books, which one do you want? They want that interview book. They want to have that chicken soup for the soul type of book, where every chapter is about someone who has made money in a different way. So let me grab this book. So this book is a few years old. I think, I don't know, 2015. So a few years old. And we have Mr. Armin Morin, who talks about making money with online seminars. Ryan Healy, who talks about beginner copywriting. Ray Edwards, who talks about the business of copywriting. David Kavanaugh, who talks about stage speaking. So we have a lot of, and I'm looking through it, and it's like, I like this book too, because there's a lot packed in, and there's a lot of different voices and styles. And again, it's like a chicken soup for the soul book where if you don't like one chapter, there's always the next chapter. So these books are really popular with people. And so I said, I've published books before. I've even published a compilation book before that was even a term. I want to publish one with you. And I recorded a quick 3-minute video, and I was in front of the camera and I said, I'm sending this to you because you were on my podcast before. And the reason why you were on my podcast is because you wanted to get more exposure, more attention, right? And so we recorded that podcast episode that was one and done. But how about getting you in a book? And I said, normally with these sorts of compilation books, if you go to an event, they'll charge you $1,000 or more, and you have to write your chapter, and you have to buy X number of copies of your book. It's the whole thing. And I said, you've already done the work. You've already been on my show. I've already interviewed you. We had a good time. So for $300 for now, but I'll be increasing it to $500, I will take our existing interview and I'll edit it and I'll get it all compacted down and I'll leave only the good stuff, make you look really smart. And that will be a chapter in our book together. And it'll have your picture, it'll have links to all your websites, your phone numbers. I'll send you 5-10 copies in the mail. I'll put it on Kindle. I'll put it in paperback form. I'll put it in audiobook form. So really good deal. And I sent this out to all 600. Well, not all, but I sent it to, I'll be honest, I sent it to 600 of my interviewees, but I left my friends out because it felt weird asking my friends for money. So I put out all these feelers, and I had a few maybes come back, but I had 17 people say, yes, I'll pay you money. And within the span of a few days, I had a few $1,000s given to me up front. And I definitely didn't get to keep all that money because I took that money and I paid a few transcriptionists to get the speech turned into words. I paid an editor to go through each transcript and get it cleaned up a little bit for grammar, punctuation, all that good stuff. I assembled it together into a Word document. I paid another editor to go through and just make sure that it didn't sound talky, that words didn't begin with so and because. And you might have noticed that if you read something that's a transcript, it sounds very spoken. And sometimes you have to condense or take a long sentence and make it 2 sentences or rearrange the order of words to make it sound more written. So it took a lot of scrubbing to make the book decent, but we got it done. We got it edited. We got a cover made. We had everyone's book on the front. We put it on Kindle. And then I said to all those 17 authors, here you go. It's live. Here's some swipe file copy. Go ahead and tweet about it. Go ahead and post it on Facebook. Go ahead and email it to your list. Promote this thing. And then a few months later, I said, hey, now the paperback version's available. I've sent you a handful of copies. Now mail for promote this thing. And then the audiobook version's available as well. So I'll be sending another email to those people saying, here's the audiobook version. Promote this thing. I'm going to, in a few weeks, set the book to be free for a few days. I'm going to mail to those authors and say, promote this thing. And so it's a win-win-win-win-win for everybody, right? Because someone showed up on your podcast, they got traffic and exposure from appearing super smart. So say Bernie Thompson could talk about his USB display adapter. He could talk about why he creates the products he does, how he markets those products on YouTube. So he gets exposure that way. But then he was one of those people who paid money to have a chapter in that book. So then I took the money and reinvested it into getting it edited, getting some books printed, maybe running some paid ads. So now he basically bought some unconventional advertising, right? Now he paid that little bit of extra money to get himself put into a book, and now he's getting that extra exposure. But I also win because I got the content created for me as far as the interview, the content created for me as far as the book, and I have an army of people who are very interested in promoting the book because it helps them out. And some of these people in the book are people that I met in person at events. So now when I see that person, they're going to know me, they're going to love me, right? Now, if I email or Facebook message or tag that person, we have a much deeper bond now because now I've interviewed them and we're in a book together. And I can even have them back on the show to promote their chapter in the book. And now we can do other things together, but it's a really great way of, sure, of making money, but also of playing the networking game and of having this group of close knit friends that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Because how many times have you been to a networking event, whether it's a huge event or something local, and maybe you exchanged business cards and you said, I met some people, but now what? Or maybe you're in some Facebook groups and you're like, well, I see the same names and I've got some friends in there, but how can we really take things to the next level? Well, see if they'll be on your podcast. You can set one up at podcastcrusher.com. And after you've had some people on your podcast, see if they'll be in a book with you. You can set up a book at makeaproduct.com. And so I wanted to share that case study with you of the marketerofthedaybook.com. And I hope I didn't sound too greedy or salesy, but it was just an easy way to make money and for things to be a win-win with everybody, because now I have friends and now I'm going to be doing even more things to promote the book, and everyone in the book got their money's worth because now they're in yet one more book. And you can buy your way into this club and be in a bunch of different books where everyone else is promoting it along with you. And I think it's a really good idea in general. And you can, like I said at the top of the hour here, at the top of this episode, you can charge more. When I say I charge $300 to some people and $500 to others, if you say that's not worth your while, charge $1,000. Or if you don't have the confidence yet, you could even do it for free and eat the cost of yourself, because what if you interviewed some somewhat high profile people? What if you interviewed people with really hot selling books, or people who have a huge online presence, or people who put on offline events? What could you do then? Well, if you know that someone has a huge following with their readers as an author, or they have a huge email list, might be worth it to have them in your book for free, knowing that they'll mail this book to their huge email list and get you a ton of new people knowing about you or getting into your funnel. Or maybe this can be your in with someone who has a huge Facebook group or who runs webinars. Maybe you'll say, I want to have you in my book for free, but now I want to be friends with you. And now I want to promote something to your Facebook group. Or I want to hop on a webinar or a live stream to your people and teach them some cool stuff. Or maybe now that you have that person in a book, if they run offline events, you can say, give me a spot on your stage, give me a speaking slot. Let me prove my worth to you even more. So what you do with this depends on your own creativity, your own follow-up, your own personal networking. But I highly recommend, number one, looking into what kind of a compilation book you can be in, because that's my next step for me personally. Is now I'm looking into what chapter in someone else's book can I buy. But number two, if you've been thinking about making a podcast, you've just been like, how does it really make money? Well, this compilation book thing is one of many possible outside the box methods of monetizing your podcast. And like I said, you might just do it for free to get that exposure, or you might have tons of guests and you might play the numbers game to then charge per chapter. And guess what? If you can show that you can do it, if you can show the results, then it's even easier next time to charge more for a chapter, to maybe guarantee some results, to have some testimonials from those other people who were in your book. So there are a lot of possibilities, but look into making a compilation book. Once again, those URLs, podcastcrusher.com to make a podcast and makeaproduct.com to create a book. I'm Robert Plank from marketerofthedaybook.com. Support your fellow podcasters and grab a copy of the book, marketerofthedaybook.com. I'm Robert Plank. Thanks and bye now. Go right now to marketeroftheday.com/iTunes to subscribe to the show, listen to other episodes, and rate and review the show.